arguably some of the most prominent people in the world were not only personal brands, they were also incredible speakers. Think of Winston Churchill. And this is right now, there should be a video running, but the video is not running. Let's see if we can get the video up.
I would say to the House, as I said to those who have joined the government, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
There we go. And what about Martin Luther King?
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Not only did their speeches amplify their brand, they also changed the world. Now, today, we're joined by Cody Kennan, Obama's chief speech writer, and Seth Godin, the marketing icon. If you want to find out what it takes to build your brand, your personal brand, well, you better watch it right now. Hey everyone, welcome to all our viewers across the world, our World Business Forum audience, and all our Chief Executive Magazine readers. I'm Martin Lindstrom, your co-host, along with my dear friend and the world's #1 leadership coach, Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall is a member of the Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame and has written some of the most iconic books out there, like What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and Mojo, How to Get It. But I have to say, beside all those amazing credentials Marshall has established over the years, he is also a very amazing human being and I would say, Marshall, a good friend to me. Listen, Marshall, thank you so much for keeping up with me and joining me one more time.
Oh, I love it. I'm here working with my comrade Martin Lindstrom. Martin is the world's most interesting human being, was ranked in the top 50 people, most influential people in the world in Time magazine. I think you're now entered into the galactic contest against the people from Mars, but you're in the top 50. Great books, including Biology, The Ministry of Common Sense. And, you know, the other thing, he's a world's expert on the concept of branding. World's expert on the concept of branding. And #1 is a good guy, but #2, I've learned so much from Martin. I'm in the coaching area, and he's really taught me how we influence people without knowing it, how we are influenced without knowing it. So it's been a huge positive influence on my life.
Thank you, Marshall. I hope that our producer is recording this show and I'm going to run this thing in a loop forever on my screensaver, right? Listen, everyone, if you have any questions or comments, just post them here or just tell us who you are and where you are. And if you like this show, don't forget to press the like button, the follow or the subscribe button. Now, in my 2002 book called Brandchild, I wrote that in the future, everyone will have their own color brochure and everyone will create their own personal brands. If the online brochure disappears, so does their brands. Well, guess what? 2 years later, Facebook was created. I fundamentally believe that we all have 3 bank accounts throughout life. Of course, one is the salary account. The second is your learning account. How much new stuff do you actually learn every day versus how much is just a routine? But the third bank account is the topic of today, our personal brand account. How much brand equity do we aggregate throughout lives? See it as your safety net, the equivalent of a corporate job, just that you don't have the job, but a brand protecting you and working with you and for you. Now, a lot of people make the mistake believing that the job they have is permanent. It's kind of a safe salary, but 65% of all employers today are actually looking for a new job here in the US alone due to COVID-19. So we have a completely new reality coming up. And even more interesting, a recent Chinese study shows that an astounding 9% of the corporate workforce in China now is building their own personal brand. What they've come to realize is that loyalty at the workplace is having an existential crisis, with diminishing visibility in the office and nearly every working hour squeezed into a stamp-sized window. You're only a click away from losing your job or finding another. Now, a personal brand not only makes your company more dependent on you, it also helps you to find a better job faster. So this is my little spiel. So let's get to the point. Marshall, tell us more about our first guest.
Our first guest is a wonderful person. His name is Cody Keenan. Cody was the speechwriter for President Obama. And I would say good is not the right word. I'd describe him as spectacular. He was so good, even the Republicans said people should listen at his speeches. He's been praised by almost everybody. He's helping President Obama with his new book. And President Obama said, I rely on Cody not only to share my vision, but to help tell America's stories. He's a brilliant writer. And he's also the founder now of a company called Fenway Strategy. And it's a company about writing speeches. And that's the first thing I want to talk to Cody about, because I doubt any of us are going to be a speechwriter like him, yet he knows some things that can help all of us. And that's where I'd like to begin our conversation, because he has helped some great people and he's still helping great people. So again, congratulations to you. Very honored to have you on the show. And as an old coach, I'm going to begin with a coaching question. You have done a spectacular job as an achiever. I mean, in the world of speechwriting, you're about the top of the line. Now you've got a business, Fenway Strategy, and you're coaching others. Talk about that transition, because a lot of our listeners are not necessarily going to be great speech writers, yet they're making a transition between a spectacular achiever like you and now coaching others to be that spectacular achiever like you. So what have you learned in terms of teaching others all this stuff, and in managing your business? I think it's fascinating.
Sure. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you guys. One thing you left out of that is part of it is actually having a great team around you too. In the White House, I had this extraordinary team of writers. There were 8 of us who covered the president, domestic policy, national security, whatever, and the First Lady speech writing. And I spent 4 years after the White House continuing to work with President Obama. But then it was just me. I really missed having my team. So I went and joined, I went and joined this company called Fenway Strategies that has this awesome young stable of speechwriters who've written for people at every level. We now have about half the Obama White House speechwriting team on our payroll. And we have just kind of this great mix of clients, political, corporate, nonprofit, academic, that, we only take clients that we're proud of, that we'd be proud to work with, whose values we share, whose aspirations we share. And, to get to your question, one of the most important things is having that great team around you. It's also actually having, I don't ever tell our clients you're going to have to do work here, but it's having a good relationship with the person you're writing for. In the White House, it was no secret that Barack Obama was really our chief speechwriter. He was kind of the leader of the group. It was his worldview, his ideas, his vision for the country that really infused every speech. And our secret weapon was that he stayed up late into the night working on his speeches because he wanted to. He liked to. He's a writer at heart. And that collaboration makes a speech much better because the speaker feels like they have buy-in, like they've been heard, like their ideas reflected. And lucky, with a great collaboration, each draft gets better than the last. You make each other better. So when that comes to our clients now, whether they're corporate, political, academic, nonprofit, we actually insist on FaceTime with the principal, whether it's a CEO, professor, whoever. And that's actually for the speaker's benefit, not so much ours, so that they feel comfortable with us, so that they feel like they're heard, so that they have buy-in into a speech and process. Not just, we don't just want to get shuffled off to a corporate communications shop because they have their own interests and desires, and sometimes they're afraid to rock the boat. You actually want to be able to speak one-on-one with the person who's going to be reading what you put down.
Cody, it's fascinating stuff. I want to go back in time to when you were working in the White House. Now, speeches is all about creating a connection with the audience. Is it true that Obama wanted 10 letters a day from real people, and you guys actually had to read all those letters, and that was informing your speeches?
Yeah, he had a great idea right after, basically right when we entered the White House. Part of the fun of campaigning is you actually get to meet people, and we affectionately call them real people, which means anybody outside of politics, anybody outside of our bubble. So, in the beginning, you're just in Iowa, like literally in people's living rooms and backyards, meeting with small groups, and you lose that as you become bigger and bigger and bigger. By the end of the campaign, we were this organization of several thousand employees and $1 billion budget, and it just grows so fast. Then you get the Secret Service apparatus around you, and then you enter the White House, and you're basically in this fortified castle with a flying fortress and another fortress that can drive you anywhere you want. So his idea was, get me 10 letters every night, from the people who write in, and he'd get thousands of letters a day. And there was this wonderful correspondence shop in the White House that would sift through all of them, make sure they're routed properly, making sure they're answered. And they'd give him a representative sample. And he was the one who wanted a representative sample, because it's not any use if you get 10 letters saying, I think you're doing great, don't change a thing. So there'd be a kind of a mix of, I like what you're doing, it's helped me personally, I wish you would do this, I can't stand you. And then they would usually throw in a child's letter at the end, the 10th letter, just to make him laugh. Sometimes kids would put in drawings, of Abraham Lincoln on a volcano or something, but it would make him laugh. And for us, that's incredible content to use for speeches. It gives us kind of a really interesting look at the way people look at issues and how they describe issues, because it's often the complete opposite of the way that the Beltway press does. And B, sometimes, if it was a particularly poignant or interesting letter, we would call up the person who wrote it and ask their permission to be included in the president's speech. Sometimes they'd even come introduce the president when we went around the country and visited their town. So once we even built the entire State of the Union address around one woman's letter from Minnesota. So it's just really helpful stuff. I've told our clients too, you guys should, I bet you have some sort of comment line. Don't ignore that. I think a lot of big corporations, right, kind of train their customer service people to just dispense with you as quickly as possible. But if you have some really loyal customers or clients or people that you want to become loyal, pay attention to their needs, try to dive into what they want. I think somebody would be really stunned to get a call from the CEO of a company they wrote in to complain to. And it'd be awesome if more companies would do that.
Look, I love what you're saying, because I'm often asked to coach people. I'm not an expert on communication like you. I'm certainly not a speech writer, but I'm also asked to give them CEOs advice on how to deal with this kind of stuff. And I love what you're saying. I want you to kind of give me a critique, because I'm going to try to copy what you said here. To me, if I'm talking to you as a leader, I'd say, Mr. and Miss Leader, it's your life, not the rest of the world's. Number two, get involved. Don't just delegate to everybody else and expect them to copy you or know who you are, write a perfect speech. And also get input. Get input from everyone around you, and then incorporate that, so you're really touching your customer base. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. To make it even simpler, you have, it's not just a content factory, but it's this, you spend all this money on market research or polling or focus groups or whatever, when just look at the trends coming in your letters. If you're getting a bunch of people saying your website sucks, then it probably sucks. That's actually another thing our correspondence office did, was they made a word cloud every day with what people were writing in about. And it's not an exact science, but you get a really good look at the end of every day as to what was really on everybody's mind.
Amazing
I love that.
Well, listen,
I love it. I know a guy who wrote a book that's kind of like this about small data. I forget his name, but a really interesting character. So you got another question for Cody?
Thank you for plugging me. Well, that's really kind of you. Listen, there's so many questions I want to ask you, Cody. I mean, there's just, if we don't have a ton of time here, so I wanted you to do it very quickly. But what makes a great speech, and what's make a great speaker?
Two very different things. What makes a great speaker is somebody who has a detailed worldview, a detailed vision, something they believe in, something they want to say and share with everybody. And a good speech flows from that. I get a lot of people now who will ask, can you make me sound like Barack Obama? Well, I mean, I could write you a speech that he would deliver, but then it's not going to sound like you, and you shouldn't want it to. I got a great piece of advice once that I've always carried with me, which is you should only write the speech that this particular person can give. You shouldn't be able to write a speech and 10 people can stand up and say it. It needs to be rooted in, your past, your background, your visions, your values. And that's what makes a really great speech. You can try to force it and say, listen, next Wednesday, we're going to go give an iconic speech that'll last for the ages. Well, okay, you can try, but a really great speech is actually rooted in context, in a time and place. The circumstances have to lend themselves to a speech that rises to a moment, but so do you. The speaker has to have the visions and the values and the ideas that meet that moment and take people somewhere interesting and show people some sort of vision to strive towards. So you can't just manufacture a great speech out of thin air. You have to have the time and place and purpose around it to really do that.
And talking about iconic speeches, I'll just have my producer bring up an iconic speech, which is Obama singing Amazing Grace. Just take a look at this, and then I'm going to ask you, was this planned or was it not? We're not very lucky right now. He's searching, going through the whole library here. It's an amazing speech, I know. Perhaps you wrote it, so why don't you just sing instead?
No, well, I'll tell you the trick to it, and then I'll give some context around it. I asked the president afterward. He took so nobody knew he was going to sing. I'll get to the context in a bit, but nobody knew he was going to sing except for maybe 3 or 4 of us who we mentioned it to that morning. And he said, again, I'm only going to do it if it feels right. If I think the congregation is going to join me, if I think the mood is there. And so at that point in the speech where, again, like 4 of us knew he was going to sing, the rest of the world is just watching him pause. He paused for about 13 seconds, I think. And I asked him afterwards, was like, were you just building a little drama there? He goes, no, the thing about Amazing Grace is you need to start really low, because once you get to, that saved a wretch like me, you're way up here and you don't want to be squeaking. So I had to hit that low note to start, that E flat. And I remember, the day of, Questlove, the drummer for the Roots band, tweeted out that, E flat is the blackest note in blues. And it was really impressive that the president could hit that. So, but the larger context of that speech, again, and that's not just, we'd never sit around just writing a speech saying like, hey, let's have the president sing, because it wouldn't make sense. The speech was a eulogy, actually, for 9 parishioners, including their pastor, who were murdered by white supremacists in Charleston, South Carolina. And the eulogy was 10 days after the massacre. But in that 10 days, all sorts of extraordinary things happened too. You had this very public debate about the Confederate flag, because the murderer was inspired by it. He had the Confederate flag patch on his bag. You had this debate about whether or not to bring it down over state houses and public squares, where it actually still flew in 2015. And even some Republicans were starting to come out saying that we should bring this down. At the same time, you had the parents of the victims forgive the killer in open court, which was pretty extraordinary. It's not the type of thing that I would do. And that was rooted in their faith teaching at the AME Church. That same week, you also had the Supreme Court hand down a decision for the second time on the Affordable Care Act, basically answering the question of whether or not America is a country that, provides health insurance to working Americans who can't afford it, and the poor. And then the very next day, the same day he gave the eulogy, the Supreme Court found a right to marriage equality for same-sex marriages.
Amazing stuff, Cody. Now, I'm going to interrupt you here because I've been told by a producer we actually have the video now. So you made the longest cliffhanger in history, and you did extraordinarily well. Let's play that video.
Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet.
Amazing. I'm actually getting the goosebumps here. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, coming up, arguably he is one of our time's most prominent marketing icons, Seth Godin. But Seth actually started his journey slightly differently. My question is, did he actually build up his personal brand? And did he have a strategy originally in mind? Or was this just happening by coincidence? Now, American Way magazine calls him America's greatest marketeer. In 2018, he was introduced into the Marketing Hall of Fame. Now, his blog is perhaps the most popular in the world, written by a single individual. Seth Godin is the author of more than 20 books, including Linchpin, Tribes, and Permission Marketing, which changed direct marketing forever, I would say. And then you have Purple Cow, now considered one of the most influential marketing books of our time. Welcome, Seth, to our show.
How are you both? And Cody, I really enjoyed listening to you. I was talking to Sammy Koppelman the other day. I didn't realize we had Sammy in common, so that's great. I got it.
Listen, Seth, I remember when you 20 years ago gave your book free of charge to anyone. In hindsight, was this in essence the step creating your platform and bringing you to what and who you are today?
Well, you've used the word personal brand a bunch of times in this conversation, and I think we need to start by just differentiating between platforms and brands. A brand is not a logo. A brand is not a shtick or a hype. A brand is a promise. It's what we expect the next time you show up. So Nike has a brand and Hyatt doesn't. Hyatt has a logo, but if Hyatt came out with a line of sneakers, we have no idea what it would be like. But if Nike opened a hotel, all of us would have a hunch as to what a Nike hotel would be like. To have a brand means that you are distinctive for a reason. And so I knew when I started my career, not as a book packager or an internet entrepreneur, but as an author in quotation marks, that there were plenty of books. What's the point of showing up if just to write? No, I needed to say something that I believed in, and I needed to do it in a distinctive way, an idiosyncratic way, just for some people, not for everyone. So I didn't do any of it to become famous or to have a platform. I did it because I had something to say.
Amazing stuff.
Seth, you said something to me I really like. That's the difference between building that brand and being famous. And that those are two different things, which, they do get kind of blurred together. I coach a lot of people, and this one is in my book, How Women Rise with Sally Helgeson, that really have trouble with the issue of being famous, with self-promotion. And I ask them 3 questions. Number 1, if you became more famous and influential, would the world be a better place? Yes or no? They invariably say yes. I say, does trying to be famous make you uncomfortable? Yes. And then I say, okay, what's more important, your personal comfort or making the world better? Well, and then they start thinking about, yeah, maybe I should do this. Let's talk about the being famous idea as well as building the brand. 2 different things. How do you encourage people who've got fantastic ideas to get over this self-promotion phobia?
Well, I have 2 answers to your question. The first one is one I blogged yesterday, which is the dilemma that the lifeguard faces. Because if you're a lifeguard and someone is drowning right in front of you, you don't have a debate with yourself about whether you're the best in your class at the cross chest carry. You don't have a debate with yourself about whether the water temperature is perfect. You save the person because it's a generous act. So one of the ways we get around imposter syndrome and our hesitancy is by, instead of saying, this is about me, it's saying, who is this act for? But I want to disagree with you about the famous part. I don't think being famous makes almost anyone's life better. And I don't think most people who have good ideas or things to share should seek to become famous or will benefit from becoming famous. And we're going to bring this all back to Obama quickly, I hope. But famous is important if you need to win an election or break box office records. But for everybody else, the goal is to be specific. to be a meaningful specific, not a wandering generality, as Zig used to say, to find the smallest viable audience, not the biggest possible audience. And part of the problem with LinkedIn and Facebook and the rest of social media is they use words like and friends, but these people don't like you and they're not your friends. And having a whole bunch of people make a metric go up doesn't mean you are accomplishing your goals. It means you are accomplishing their goals. And I am surprised that the women you just quoted said, yes, my life would be better if I was more famous. I don't think that's true.
Interesting.
Oh, I love your
I
answer.
like what
Now,
you said about, I like what you said about being specific, because you do want to impact a specific group. So that's a really good thought of encouraging people to say, who are the people you do want to have this positive impact with? And if you use the word famous to indicate generality, you might be missing what's most important.
That's right. In my world, we call this famous to the family. And we used to play 20 questions when the kids were young. And one time, one of my kids picked Ziggy the house painter. And I was like, that's not fair. He's not famous. And it was like, he's famous to the family. And that's what you need, famous to the family.
so Seth, tell me, what are some of the biggest mistakes business executives are doing out there when they try to establish their own identity?
Well, I think, as Cody said, the biggest mistake they try to establish somebody else's identity. They say, who can I copy? Who can I be like? How can I fit inside the lines? Where's deniability? How do I make this something that isn't my fault? They are afraid of being idiosyncratic because guess what? In order to get the job they got, at every level along the way, they had to make their boss look good. And now they're finally at this level where that's not their job. Their job is to be the leader. And to be a leader means that you will be wrong because you're not a manager, you're a leader. And that means you're dancing with the unknown. You're exploring the next frontier. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're probably going to be mediocre at it, which is just another word for average.
Now, coming up, what is the biggest personal branding mistake Obama did? And if Seth Godin would have been Obama's advisor on his personal brand, what would he have done differently? Now, I'm going to bring back Cody onto the screen as well. And I just want to continue this conversation with one question for both of you guys. I mean, Cody, Obama is using a lot of metaphors in his speeches, or were and still is. Seth, when I listen to your speeches and when we talk together, you use metaphors. You just use one with a lifesaver right now. Is metaphors an essential part of helping people to elevate a mindset into another mindset, because you already have equity established in one area and now you can bring it about to another area? Is that one way to go if we want to be direct here? Cody, what's your view on this?
Yeah, of course. It's it's good to any speech, in particular, just to get people to think about an issue a little bit differently. It's the classic example of, show, don't tell. I'm always striving to put metaphors into my speeches and certainly into the book I'm writing. It's a challenge to, as a speechwriter, to get out of the concept of, telling all the time. You want to be able to show in ways that people can understand, in ways that make them feel a kinship with your, brand or product or whatever it is you're working on.
Seth, you established the purple cow metaphor, right? And a lot of other things. Tell me, how do you get to that point where you establish this? Because it's not easy to find them, right?
It's not easy. Digging ditches isn't easy. And working as a frontline healthcare worker isn't easy. Sitting indoors with a keyboard, that's not physically taxing. The difficult part is not stopping once you have a memo. And, if you watch almost any good movie with the sound off, you can pretty much figure out exactly what the movie is about. Human beings are not information processing machines in search of rationality. Human beings are exchangers of emotional connection. And the reason we need a speech at all, instead of just sending an email, is because it demonstrates to the listener emotional standing, status, affiliation, and all sorts of signals, symbols, semiotics that are missing from the facts. And, President Obama had the hardest job there ever was, because when he started, we had just a few TV networks. We had most people listening. And by the time he was done, the entire media landscape had changed. And what that meant was he could no longer adopt the Carol Burnett voice of, I'm going to talk to 60 million people who may or may not in this moment all have the same worldview. Instead, we have fractured our world, not just the United States, our world, into 10 million little pieces where anybody with a keyboard can have a voice in a soapbox. And what that means is the fundamental nature of giving a speech to the masses is changed forever, because there are no masses anymore. It is better to own a salsa company than to own Heinz ketchup, because Heinz ketchup isn't for everyone anymore, because there is no everyone anymore.
Cody, how did you handle that challenge?
Well, one thing I'd quibble with is that we never actually changed, what he was talking about or the subject matter. You want to stay true to, for the sake of this conversation, your brand, to your beliefs, to your value system. What we did do, because Seth's absolutely right about fractured viewership. I mean, that had been true for decades by the time we walked in. I don't think State of the Union viewership's been any higher than it ever was in the 80s ever since. It just steadily goes down every single year because people have more to watch, and people can create their own news cocoons where they never hear a view that's out of step with their own all day long. So one thing we did is we created the first White House Office of Digital Strategy that just acted as another arm of our comms shop where, it's not just tweeting out lines of speeches, but we actually went to places where different audiences were to disseminate the president's ideas, the first lady's ideas, whether it's, the first lady sitting down with Good Housekeeping to talk about her garden, but more importantly, to talk about healthy eating. It was president going on a web show called Between Two Ferns that most of the Washington press corps thought was absurd. He went on with a comedian to talk about health insurance, and it was the single biggest day of young people getting enrolled. So you go reach an audience that otherwise wouldn't see you or hear about these things. Every year when he picked his bracket on SportsCenter, he made sure to talk about signing up for health insurance, and each time we'd see a spike. So that's the way we dealt with kind of the fractured audiences, by going out to meet every single one of them as wherever they were.
Both of you have said something. It took me till age 70 to figure this out. I'm slowly figuring it out. I was puzzled why intelligent people seem to constantly do irrational things. And, Seth, what you said, and Martin, what you've taught me is really helpful, that really our decisions are seldom based on rationality. As you said, we're not information processing machines. Our decisions are often based on emotion. And then the rationale for our decisions are based on intellectual rationalization. Just one quick comment from each of you. The role of emotion in helping communicate and creating that kind of emotion to influence a decision. Cody, what's your thought?
I've always joked that I use emotion as a crutch in my speeches. When I succeeded John Favreau, who'd been with President Obama for 6 years at that point, I think, John's strength was always kind of this big picture logical argument. And my strength was really just kind of going for your gut by trying to find some emotional connection and pass that off for wisdom. But it often works, even if you're talking to an audience that might disagree with you profoundly, there are still certain universal values and aspirations and emotions that we all share. And we, I went right at it every single time. I tried to think about what an audience would be. It's the old Atticus Finch story. You walk around in somebody else's skin for a while. I try to do that with every single speech. And, even if somebody came in there hating Barack Obama, they might leave thinking like, you know what, at least he kind of gets me and what I care about, even if I'm still not going to vote for him.
That's right.
Seth,
what are your thoughts, Seth, on emotions?
Human beings aren't that different than any other species on the planet. We care about status and we care about affiliation. Affiliation is who's next to us, where are we fitting in, are we safe in the circle? And status is who's up, who's down, who am I above, who is below me. And if you want to decode American politics, or if you want to decode office politics, or you want to decode dogs at the pound, it's all the same, affiliation and status. And then we invent, quote, rationality on top of that. But, even a supposedly rational economist is still impressed when a Nobel Prize winner walks into the room, even though it's irrational to do that. And so don't start with the rational and assume that everyone will sign up for it. Realize that everyone, including you and me, is irrational. And then see what is it that we have in common so we can plan a rational path forward. And it's usually based on status and affiliation, one or the other, depending on where we are and who we're talking to.
Now, I'm going to give you two a challenge. Quoting a recent BCD article, 22% of all employees consider developing their own personal brand. Now, we ask Seth Godin, not to be mixed up with Seth Godin, right? The chairman of Beyond Meat. It's actually a 2009 startup, which today has grown to nearly a $500 million company, which is crazy. We asked him to ask you two a question. Let's roll the BCG minute.
Hi, I'm Seth Godin. Not to be confused with Seth Godin, though I have been a time or two. My question around personal branding is I'm often approached by people who are interested in getting into food but come from very different industries. They've been managing a hedge fund or a corporate lawyer, and they ask me, how can they make that transition? I'd love to hear how you guys would answer that question.
Now, Seth, you have migrated from, first working in startups, then suddenly you were in permission marketing, and then you moved into all sorts of different culture aspects and branding, and you've been all over the place, I would claim, at least as an outsider. How did you manage to do that migration, and what advice will you give to your name brother?
Well, Seth and I corresponded like 20 years ago when he was in the tea business, I think. The food business is not food, it's business. People don't buy Beyond Meat because they are hungry. In fact, every single person who buys his product had something for breakfast. And so what we sell, whatever it is, whatever industry we're in, are stories and interactions, relationships, possibility. And if you are, quote, transitioning from a hedge fund, well, your big problem is you're expecting a lot of the same benefits, whether they're measurable or not, in this new business that you had in the old business. And that's the mistake. The mistake is to insist that people come to you, that they want what you want. And that's not the way human beings process things. They have a noise in their own heads, and that noise is very, very loud. And if we can hear the noise in other people's heads, we get a chance to show up for them and with them. And that's the magic of what Cody did with the president, because he isn't there to change the mind of someone who diametrically opposes the change he seeks to make. He's there to establish that people like us do things like this. Find that core group and be there with them. And it doesn't matter what you call the industry.
Cody, you evolved. You're the president over time. I mean, there would have been a huge difference from the moment he stepped onto the arena and became extraordinary, famous in 18 minutes to his last farewell speech. Tell me about that journey of how you grew with him and how the whole tone of voice changed, if it changed.
It didn't change. Circumstances changed, of course, but I think if you look through all of his biggest speeches going back to 2004, you're going to see the same narrative thread kind of through all of them about his vision of the country and what it can be. But it was, he's, like I said, he's a writer, so he actually loves this stuff, but it was really a speech as much as anything else, if not more, that kind of rocketed him to stardom. He walked into the Garden in Boston in 2004, anonymous, and he walked out 19 minutes later, a global megastar. And that's the power of what a speech can do. I mean, he reminds me all the time to this day that he wrote that hit speech by himself, which is true. I don't need the reminder all the time, but it's true. But the circumstances change, life changes. We didn't know in 2008, we were coming in to kind of conquer a variety of threats, which was an unprecedented recession and a climate in peril and a country at 2 wars. And by the time we're leaving 8 years later, the biggest threat to America was really kind of our eroding democracy. So one thing we did in the entire final year was do kind of a series of big speeches when we had a big stage with the meeting of time and place to kind of argue for democracy and what it depends on, which is our own active participation. So his general theme message about this country, and it's as important as ever right now with what we've been going through in politics, which is that, he would talk about progressive change as a validation of American identity, not a repudiation of it. He'd say that we are a strong enough country to be self-critical, to look upon mistakes we've made in the past, and then to right those wrongs because of the values that imperfectly defined our founding. And that's what generations of Americans fought and died for, those values, the chance to make ourselves better. And that approach, rather than just condemning our past, but actually saying that change is endemic to who we are, and that gave people the space to be proud of their American identity while seeing change as part of what makes us American. And that was really, people always talk about how optimistic Barack Obama was. Well, that's his vision kind of lends itself to that. So if we never really sat around and talked about the Obama brand, what are we going to do to build his brand? But he was always true to it anyway. And as speechwriters, we often saw ourselves kind of as the keepers of the brand. We wouldn't say that out loud or think it, but by keeping him on the straight and narrow, keeping him true to what he said before, true to what he believes in. And we would always view speeches not just as one-offs, what we were saying tomorrow we're going to ignore on Wednesday, but as part of this much bigger arc of his rhetoric throughout his career.
Amazing stuff. Now, Marshall, do you want to ask a wrap-up question or just share a couple of reflections of what you picked up?
Yeah, just a couple of reflections. And that is, to me, one thing I've gotten out of this is just, like you said, the importance of be true to yourself. And really, when I work with people as their coach, I'm not giving them advice like Cody would, because I'm not that, or Seth, I'm not an expert in either one of those fields, but really just encouraging them to be true to yourself, to get involved, and don't let someone else do it for you. You've got to be part of the process, and it's really your story you're telling. And if you say to somebody else, tell my story, I think that's a big mistake. I don't know, Seth, your thought, or Cody, your thought.
Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, I often just tell our clients, don't be afraid to sound like a human being. People get so spun up in corporate speak, political jargon, the things they think they're supposed to say. Audiences are always much more interested in hearing the truth, not the opposite of a lie, but things we already know and that people don't often have the courage to say. I mean, I didn't have any higher political ambition for myself than being chief speechwriter at the White House. Even then, I didn't have that ambition, before joining the campaign. And so what I like doing now is, and just taking a brief break from politics, even though we have political clients, is to just help people kind of become the best version of themselves on the stage. Just all of the ideas that are running through your head, I will help you make those logical and linear and compelling, and to tell, take your already great story and just make it even better. I enjoy doing that. And, what actually gives me purpose on top of that is I teach speech writing now to college students at Northwestern University, which is my alma mater, because, when I graduated, I had a political science degree, and that actually doesn't really do squat when you're trying to find that first job. People want to know what you can do. So I now teach my students everything I know about speech writing in 3 months, and they can show up looking for that first job with a portfolio of things they've written and show people that what they can actually do. And it's been really fun to place, my kids, I call them my kids, in mayor's offices and state houses and the White House all around the country, so that they can write, and kind of be that next generation, and then hopefully ultimately take the generation after that under their wing.
Cody, what an amazing feedback. Listen, I just want to say, first of all, thank you to you for joining us on our show. Seth, amazing as always. You are a true star there. Thanks a lot, both of you. I'm going to jump straight into the mural summary and try to summarize what you two have said. Don't kill me now, okay? Let's run the mural summary. It's always interesting to see what our guests are saying. And remember, everything I'm doing right now is live, so I'm not cheating. But one of the things I picked up from the conversation was, in particular from Seth, was that one thing is that you are a brand. Everyone is a brand. You don't need to have more than 5 people in your audience. You're still a personal brand. And then, of course, the amplification of that is, of course, having a platform and building a platform. And these are the 2 different factors of personal branding. I'm going to bring up my little model here. So let me just see. The first thing I would say is, how you see yourself. One of the things which Cody mentioned here was really very simple. He said, don't try to say to the audience what you think they want to know, what you like to see look like. Try to be true to yourself and to the emotions you have and communicate that. Now, the second circle I'm going to bring in here is how others see you. And I'm going to quote the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, which said that a personal brand, is what you want people to think about you when you're not around. So that's the second thing. Now, if I look at the circle in the middle, this is probably what we call your personal brand, which is in there. And it's a fine balance between those different factors. And we just heard it today, because you can't go too far trying to pretend you are someone which you're not. You have to stay true to your emotion. I'm going to add a little point to this as well. And this is an interesting story. If you take some of the most powerful brands in the world, what do they have in common? Well, in my opinion, what they have in common is that you can encapsulate them into one word. If I say Volvo, most people will say safety. If I say search, you may say Google, one word. And I would actually claim that you actually should own one word. It's not easy, I know, but that one word will force you to be focused. It will also force you to stand out, because all the classic words out there are already taken. And typically, I would claim that if you combine two ordinary things in a new way and create that word, that could be your driving force, the North Star you're building your personal brand around. I hope I'm not fired by Cody and Seth. I apologize if I said something wrong, but at least this was my attempt to do the mural summary. Wow, Marshall, we back again in a room of two. Listen, next Tuesday the 7th of December, we'll actually catch up with Nobel Prize laureate Daniel Kahneman. The Economist listed him as the 7th most influential economist in the world. Daniel is the author of the bestsellers Thinking Fast and Slow, and probably one of our time's most respected expert in the psychology of behavior under certainty, or rather uncertainty, which we have a lot of right now. We'll also be joined by former Apple executive Nilfer Merchant, where we'll talk about how you actually react to pressure and how you react to uncertainty. I couldn't imagine a better couple than those two. So that is happening the 7th of December. And with that, I just want to say, Marshall, my friend, thank you one more time for this amazing stuff. Thanks to all of you guys watching out there. We'll be back again the 7th of December, same time, same place. Bye for now.